Shalom and welcome to Ne'er Jewish Ministries, where we teach the Bible from a Jewish historical, cultural, and linguistic perspective. Today I want to provide a Israel update together with a short teaching on the Day of Trumpets. Now, just in the past 24 hours, we had another Iranian attack on Israel. There's been one attack after another on Israel. Why does it seem like the world is spinning out of control? Over the past year, there's been one attack after another, and it's been difficult to follow all of the details of these different attacks from these different factions and groups, enemies without, enemies within. And part of my goal in this presentation is just to provide some perspective of what is going on. I'm not a journalist or an expert in politics, but I want to try to do my best from being an Israeli citizen and a believer here in Israel, and to provide a little bit of context about what is going on in Israel, and hopefully provide some comfort and hope as well with a biblical perspective. A lot of the battles, a lot of the attacks that have happened here are difficult to understand about who's doing what, but I want to provide some perspective with that, as well as tie it in with the upcoming Feast of Trumpets, or the Day of Trumpets, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and the meaning and what it means to us. Now, it's been just about a year since the October 7th attack by Hamas. I'm recording this teaching on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. In a couple more days, it will be the one-year anniversary to the October 7th attack by Hamas in 2023. Now, last year, about this time, I was actually flying to America on October 3rd, and I was attending a family wedding on the West Coast, and I stayed with my sister for about a few weeks. I was planning to be there for a few weeks, ended up staying there longer because of this October 7th attack. So I was outside of Israel when the attack happened, and it was horrific seeing the attacks of Hamas against the innocent civilians of Israel, the slaughtering of over 1,200 people in one day, the taking of the hostages back into Gaza, and the war that has ensued ever since that one day of October 7th, 2023. Now, some of the hostages have been released, over the over 200 hostages which were taken into Gaza. However, there are still approximately 97 hostages who remain in Gaza, whether they're in the tunnels or wherever they're being held. We don't know how many of them are actually even still alive. And so as a result of this, there is a continual effort by the Israeli government, the Israeli military, to bring these hostages home and to rescue anyone who is still alive. And Israel's doing its best to bring this war to an end. This war could end today if Hamas simply surrendered, laid down its weapons, and gave up the hostages. But they are not. They want to continue this battle. And unfortunately, the world acts like Israel is the aggressor here, when it's simply defending itself and trying to rescue its own people, while bringing Hamas to justice for the great injustice, the terror acts that it committed 1 year ago. Now, besides Hamas, we have Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that occupies or is operating from the land of Lebanon, right? The country of Lebanon, which is the country to the north of Israel. Now, Hezbollah has embedded itself, this terrorist organization has embedded itself into Lebanese society and into politics to such an extent that it has become basically the military wing of the country of Lebanon, and everyone in that country lives under its rule. They basically call the shots by their Islamic jihadist rule. Now, there is actually a good percentage of Christians who live in Lebanon. It's estimated that there are 35 to 40% Christians living in Lebanon, or 35 to 40% of the population of Lebanon is Christian. So out of the 4.5 million estimated citizens in Lebanon, about 1.5 million are actually Christians, but they have to live under the authority of this Islamic rule of Hezbollah, right? This Islamic terrorist organization. Now, Hezbollah started attacking Israel a day after Hamas. So October 8th, 2023, it's been almost a year since Hezbollah started firing on Israel. And they've been simply firing missiles and drones into especially northern Israel daily for the past year, and literally sending over 50, 100 missiles every day. Thankfully, they don't have great accuracy. And also, the citizens of Israel have evacuated that northern region because they could not tolerate these constant missiles coming over from Lebanon into northern Israel. And so, literally, over 60,000 residents of northern Israel have relocated in different parts of Israel. So, they've evacuated their homes and they're living in different places all over Israel. Most of them are staying in hotels in Israel because of the ongoing wars. There aren't any tourists in Israel, or very few, and so a lot of the Israeli residents from the north are staying in hotels throughout Israel, that is in safer locations. And so all these people have been relocated as a result of Hezbollah's daily attacks on Israel. And Israel's done almost nothing to retaliate against Hezbollah because they've been focusing on Hamas in Gaza up until recently. And just to put it in perspective again, right, you see the map on your screen of Israel kind of in the pink with the darker red areas that are Palestinian Authority controlled, right? So you have the Gaza Strip, which is on the southern coast, as well as the West Bank area. And you have the different Arab factions which live in them, as well as Lebanon in the north, right, where Hezbollah rules. Now, throughout this past year, there's been calls for a ceasefire, and it's kind of like Israel's getting blamed for starting a war when they're simply defending themselves. And so while Israel's been trying to get the hostages released from Hamas in Gaza, there's been calls for a ceasefire to try to stop this. And as well as just this past week, the French president, as well as the US president, have been calling for a ceasefire at the UN conference this past week with this whole war with Hezbollah. Now, just some simple questions. Where were these demands for Hezbollah to agree to a ceasefire over the course of this past year? They've been firing daily. Why does all the pressure come against Israel, not against these terrorist organizations? You know, I show on the screen, I have a picture of one of the attacks of Hezbollah, one of the thousands of missiles they sent over to the north, which hit a playground of children in Mijdal Shams, where 12 people were killed. The majority of those were children. And this was just senseless missiles sent over by Hezbollah, right? So where are the calls for Hezbollah to have a ceasefire this past year? Why is it that every time Israel defends itself against enemies who strike us first and seek to destroy the Jewish people from Israel, the world calls for a ceasefire? It's always Israel's fault. It's always Israel that has to have the responsibility of stopping the wars. Now, on top of the two local enemies that we have, Hamas and Hezbollah, there's also Iran, right? Iran's first attack against Israel was on April 14th, a direct attack of this year, just a few months ago, when they sent over 200 missiles and drones to attack Israel. And thankfully, Israel, along with the United States and other international partners, were able to bring down 99% of these missiles and drones. And then we just had this second attack yesterday, October 1st, 2024, when over, I think it was 181 missiles were sent to Israel within a period of about 2 hours. And it was just missile after missile. It sounded like it was thundering outside. There were so many bombs going off. But again, thankfully, God protected us, and we were able to take out the majority of those missiles and keep them from harming innocent civilians. I believe one person was killed in Jericho, and one loss of life is too many, but it could have been a lot worse. Now, on top of Iran's constant attacks, we have this group called the Houthis in Yemen, who continually attack Israel. So who are the Houthis? Where is Yemen, right? So just to put it in perspective, Yemen is on it's located on the southern part of Arabia. And this country is called the Republic of Yemen, and it has a majority Arab Muslim population. You can see how it's situated on the peninsula here of where the Red Sea meets the Gulf of Aden. And this is a major international shipping route which goes up through the Red Sea and into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the Houthis have been terrorizing international shipping lanes accessing the Red Sea, and they literally think that anyone who goes through there is supporting Israel, so they're attacking them. Again, this is another Islamic jihadist group in Yemen. And they're not only attacking Israel, but they're also attacking international shipping. And they've sunk at least one ship. I haven't really kept up with all of their acts, but they've basically been given a slap on the hand by the international community. Once in a while, they'll have some kind of retaliation, but the Houthis are still active in terrorizing the world in Yemen. Now, on top of the external countries and Islamic jihadist group, we have factions within Israel. For example, we have Islamic Jihad in the West Bank of Israel, right? So again, an Islamic jihadist organization in the West Bank of Israel that is terrorizing the citizens of Israel. And they will simply have terrorist acts of killing innocent civilians sometimes. They're against the Israeli state. They're against Jewish people in general. And so the Israeli military and police have to continually deal with these different factions that are all over the country, especially in areas like the West Bank. Now, besides the Islamic factions, we have Jewish groups that are also causing problems in Israel, especially during this past year. We have these Israeli Jews who are protesting against the current government, protesting against the war, especially protesting against our current prime minister, Bibi Netanyahu, or Benjamin Netanyahu. And they see him as a bigger enemy than Hamas and Hezbollah in some ways. Now, just to point out that many of you have seen these protests, especially in Tel Aviv, on the international news. And you'll have thousands of people come out. And it seems like this is like the majority of Israel. It's not. It's a minority. It's a smaller group. They are basically the leftists. And they are more anti-Bibi than anything else. They are against Netanyahu, and they think everything is his fault. They don't blame Hamas. They don't blame Hezbollah. They blame our prime minister Netanyahu. Now, just to put this in perspective again, because sometimes I see international news and they'll have people on both sides, and someone will call out saying, well, look, the majority of Israelis are against Bibi Netanyahu and they're against this war. And they say, look at the protests in Tel Aviv. And then everyone gets silent because they think, oh, yeah, you're right. That's not the truth. There are these protests, but they're not the majority. They're a minority. Just this past week, they did a survey asking Israelis if they support a ceasefire against Hezbollah right now. 78% said no. They do not support a ceasefire. They support the ongoing war against Hezbollah to bring them to cause them to stop, right? It's not that Israelis want war. Israelis want peace, but they know that they need to bring Hamas and Hezbollah to justice. So again, 4 out of 5 Israelis support the war effort as of today. And again, this whole anti-Netanyahu sentiment, it's not the majority. Just this past week again, we see the coalition government that Netanyahu leads as growing, and there's actually an opposition leader who just joined the coalition government of Netanyahu. It's a very different system here than America and some other places, but there's all these different, there's over 40 political groups, and they have to have agreements, right? But Netanyahu has had a tough year leading the country with all the things that are going on. He gets the blame for everything, but political leaders are seeing that he's actually doing the right thing for Israel. He's leading in a good way, and his support is actually growing. And this is making the left crazy right now. But anyway, this is the current situation in Israel. Again, I share this because there's so much negative international news out there against Israel, what's really going on here, what the people want, right? The majority of the people want to see Hezbollah brought to justice. They want to see them cut off from being able to terrorize our citizens, to be able to resettle our citizens in the north of Israel, to bring Hamas to justice, to get our hostages back, right? We have to apply pressure in order to restore security and peace in the land. Now, just to bring some concluding thoughts to this Israel update. It is challenging to navigate all the different acts of terror and aggression in the Middle East with all the factions that I've mentioned just in this brief presentation here. But I just want to encourage you to do your best to understand, to do your research and try to understand the different factions and how they relate. And what's really going on here in Israel. And again, it's important to understand that Hamas and Hezbollah started these wars. Hamas started this war with their control over Gaza, and unfortunately, there are some innocent people in Gaza that are being that are suffering as a result of Hamas's rule, right? And also with the people in Lebanon that are unfortunately under the control of Hezbollah. But Hezbollah and Hamas are the ones who started these wars, and Israel is only trying to reestablish peace and security. And this is just the bare minimal facts. Now, it's also important to understand the spiritual component, the spiritual roots of these attacks and wars against Israel. And when I speak of the spiritual component, number one, speaking about the Islamic jihadist movement and how they are so against Israel, right? In Islamic jihad, their goal is to rule the world. They believe that Islam will rule the world, and so they're trying to bring it about through jihad. Jihad is holy war, right? So most Muslims don't really read the Quran; they don't really know what they believe. But those who do are living this out, and they're living out this jihad, this holy war. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and part of that is kill the Christians and Jews unless they submit to you. So that is why they act as they do. Now, why is Israel the main focus of their attacks? Why are they constantly against the Jewish people in Israel? And that's because this little country of Israel, this land of Israel, is surrounded by majority Muslim nations. As you see on your screen, the green countries are Muslim majority peoples. And the small Jewish nation of Israel is wedged there between these Muslim nations. Not only that, but this land was once ruled by a Islamic nation or a empire. The Ottoman Empire ruled here until 1917. And so for Islamic conquered territory to go back to the infidel is seen as a great shame, right? It's a stain in their history. And so because Muslims once ruled in this land, but now it's a Jewish state, that is seen as a stain in their history. And so they want to reverse this. And that's why there's this constant holy war against the Jews here in Israel. Now, again, to put it all together, I believe that God still has a plan for Israel and the Jewish people. And I share this because sometimes we view this simply as, oh, this is another war in the world. But we need to, again, understand it from the other spiritual side of the Bible. Now, I didn't share this regarding the spiritual roots, but there's a deeper spiritual root, understanding the promise of God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right, and to their descendants, to their seed, to the special land of Israel with Jerusalem as its capital. And unfortunately, there are some Christians who think that all the promises of God and all of the position or the place of Israel and the Jewish people ended when the Messiah came into the world 2,000 years ago. And I think this is not treating the Bible with integrity. I think it's missing part of it, right? So Christians who believe in this type of theology is called replacement theology, right? They replace Israel with the church. They believe that the quote unquote church, Christianity, has taken over any promise to Israel. And they simply think that Israel and Jewish people are done with. But again, I think this is a misunderstanding of Scripture, and it's also a clear misunderstanding of the end times, because we know that in the end times there will be a culmination, a global coming against the city of Jerusalem, against the Jewish people, and against those who believe in Yeshua as the Messiah. And anyone who does not understand this has not read their Bible, right? It's very clear in the scriptures that there's going to be great opposition to the people of God in the end times, both Jews and Christians, whether you're nationally Jewish or you're or simply born Jewish, right? But especially those who believe in Yeshua as well, Christians, right? There's going to be a lot of opposition against God's people in the end times, coming against the city of Jerusalem. And this is just part of end times prophecy. I have a full series of teachings on the book of Revelation if you're interested in learning more about the end times. But as believers, we need to know the truth, the practical truth as far as what's going on today, and we need to be able to communicate that clearly, as well as what God's plan is for this world, right? Including Israel and the Jewish people. And I think it's just good to have a solid biblical understanding of that and be able to talk about it and share it with others. Now, just as we end this Israel update part, I just want to say that I think Israel must do what it has to with Hamas and Hezbollah in order to restore peace, right? Israel must defeat Hezbollah and Hamas because they won't stop until Israel is destroyed, wiped off the map, right? Until the Jewish people are killed. They're living out their Islamic jihad. So Israel will do everything in its power to take out the Islamic terrorists and to restore peace and security to Israel, which will also help bring peace and security to Gaza and Lebanon as well, especially the Christians living in Lebanon. Now, I just want to also state that while war is a current reality and I think a necessity to prevent a greater evil, I know that war is not the answer to true peace, right? You never really can gain true peace by war. You can get a temporary peace, and it may be the best option, but true peace and resolving the conflicts in this world will only truly be resolved through the coming of the return of the Messiah, right? The establishing of his kingdom upon this earth. And this is where our hope is. So we got to separate that which is going on today and what's the best path forward with our greatest hope and the true peace, which is only in our Messiah. And that's where I want to connect it to this, this biblical holy day of the Feast of Trumpets, as we call it, which will take place this week. Again, I'm recording this on Wednesday, October 2nd. And the Feast of Trumpets, as we call it, I'll explain that in a minute, or the Day of Trumpets, is it begins actually this evening on Wednesday evening, because tomorrow is the first day, Thursday, October 3rd. So we'll actually be starting here in just a few hours. And I just want to give a little bit of context and teach a little bit about the basics of this appointed time of the Feast of Trumpets. And we read about it here in Leviticus 23. Which says this. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, you shall have a rest, a reminder by blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work, but you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. Okay, so that's Leviticus 23, verses 23 to 25. And we read how it's to be on the 7th day, the first day of the 7th month. And it says that you shall have a holy rest, a reminder by blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. So that's where we get this idea of the Feast of Trumpets, right, from this phrase. But just to explain it in Hebrew, it says Shabbaton Zikaron Tru'a Mikra Kodesh, which is literally a memorial Sabbath of blowing the horn, a holy convocation, right? So you're supposed to have this special Sabbath day of rest, a holy convocation, like a worship meeting, right? And the whole focus is a blowing of the horn, or that's one of the main actions outside of bringing a sacrifice to the Lord, which is back in the Old Testament, right? Now, what does this all mean, right? Out of the 7 appointed times in Leviticus 23, for example, the Sabbath day, the Passover, the Feast of Booths, right? All these different appointed times. Out of these 7, the Feast of Trumpets is the least mentioned, meaning it's the least explained. It only has 3 verses. And it's also the most mysterious. Why is it there? So what is the purpose for this day of blowing the trumpet or blowing the shofar? Why did God command it? It's actually a good question. There's no clear answer in the scriptures. However, I do think as you put the scriptures together as a whole, it makes sense, but you have to kind of do your research. Now, in the Bible, the blowing of a trumpet or a shofar is used for gathering the people of Israel together for signaling a time of battle, and for announcing a new king. We see this clearly in the scriptures in different places. Now, according to the rabbis, the purpose of the day of blowing the trumpet or shofar is to acknowledge that the Lord alone is king of the earth. And we read this in Psalm 47. And I want to just read this psalm. It's only a few verses long, and I think it will help us put perspective on understanding the Day of Trumpets, or the Feast of Trumpets, where we read this in Psalm 47. Clap your hands, all you peoples, shout to God with a voice of joy. For the Lord Most High is to be feared, a great king over all the earth. He subdues people under us and nations under our feet. He chooses our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. Selah. God has ascended with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. The word there is shofar. Sing praises to God, sing praises to our King, sing praises, for God's the King of all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm of wisdom. God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne. The princes of the people have assembled as the people of the God of Abraham, for the shields of the earth belong to God. He is highly exalted. So that's Psalm chapter 47. Now, just to mention that this psalm is read 7 times on the day of trumpets, or the day of Rosh Hashanah. I'll explain that in a minute, before blowing the shofar, right? So it's literally in the spirit of recognizing God is the king of all the earth, and it's blown in that mindset, in that spirit, acknowledging that he is the king of all the earth. The Lord is king of all the earth. He reigns over the nations, and he sits on his holy throne, as we read in Psalm chapter 47. It's a beautiful chapter, and it puts it in the context of that truah, the blowing of the horn. Now, we also know that there is a future day of trumpets that is coming when the Messiah will return and we will be gathered to him. We read about this and several times in the New Testament, specifically in Matthew chapter 24, verse 31, where we read, "And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet blast, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other." So it is good to have a day like the Day of Trumpets, right? To remember that God is King of all the earth, that he is sitting on his throne, and that Yeshua the Messiah will return to this earth and will be gathered together to him or with him, right? At the great blast of the trumpet. Now, as I mentioned, the Day of Trumpets is also called Rosh Hashanah, meaning the new year, the head of the year, the new year. And this is also a biblical concept that is actually not well understood. It's rarely taught or talked about in Christianity. Most pastors don't really understand it. A lot of Messianic Jews don't really understand it either. I've done a lot of research on it, and I have a 3-part teaching series, which is called the Biblical Calendar. It's very detailed, but if you're interested in learning more about this idea of Rosh Hashanah, the new year that is connected, it's on the same day as the Day of Trumpets, right? It's called the Day of Trumpets. It's also called Rosh Hashanah, the new year. So if you want to understand this more, you can view the biblical calendar on the Nether Reglai website. I've included it in the email I sent out to everyone who received that today. So feel free to check that out if you want to go deeper. So as we celebrate this new biblical year, which is announced on the Day of Trumpets, we want to hope for and pray for peace and security to be restored here in Israel. Now, I also want to just encourage you to be praying for the peace of Israel, for the peace of Gaza, for the peace of Lebanon, for the peace of Iran, and for many people to cry out to God and to turn to the Lord, and to understand that Yeshua is the Messiah during these days of uncertainty and during the special time of the Day of Trumpets. So may many come to know him. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and because this is God's holy city, the capital of Israel. So this is the conclusion to my Israel update and to this teaching on the Day of Trumpets, the day of Rosh Hashanah. So I want to wish you a Shana Tova, a good and blessed New Year. Let's be hoping for happier and more peaceful days in the near future. Thank you so much for watching this teaching. If you want to share it with others, please feel free to do so. I also want to encourage you to support our ministry, Nadler Glai Jewish Ministries, so that we can make these teachings available to you and others. And you can do so on our website, nadlerglai.com, or simply scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to the website. And then you can either give a donation. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to our weekly teachings if you're not already receiving our weekly emails, so that you can keep up with our teachings. Thank you so much. God bless you. Shana Tova, and see you again next time.